to order. Before we start the standard motions regular agenda, we'd like to welcome aboard 2 new members of the Planning and Zoning Commission today. Ms. Peggy O'Brien, pleased to have her here, and Mr. Adam Ballesteros, pleased to have you here. Thank you very much. And we appreciate them donating their time. First order of business is going to be standard motions for the minutes dated July 23rd. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Motion been made and seconded. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Being none, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes approved. If you hadn't noticed, on our regular agenda, item 1 has been deleted. We will not hear that today. So we'll go to item 2, which is a final plat. To consider a request for a final plat of Hospital Acres Second Subdivision. The site is generally located in the north half of Section 5, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. The property is approximately 67.3 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think everything's been submitted. Steve, help me out here if I'm mistaken.
We'll just have you state your name and...
Oh, Brant Molson with Cattermers, Lee and Jackson,
Okay, thank you.
representing the hospital. I think everything's been submitted. All the conditions that from previously have been met. I'm not aware of anything that hasn't been taken care of. I think there's a couple little comments that still need to be talked about. And I think we're working on those, cleaning those all up, so I'm not aware of anything that needs to be taken care of.
I would have a question on the requirements that were written and stated that they were met. Was this done before our last major rainfall as far as flooding, floodplain, FEMA? Did you have any effect at all that would say these statements are not correct in this last?
I think the site
no.
performed quite admirably
Okay.
during the rainstorm. Chuck, you were there, right? Present? Yeah, there wasn't any problems with it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Ms. Wall.
Okay. Steve, is there anything from you? Okay.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come to the podium. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment? We'll close the public portion of the hearing, and at this time I'd ask Mr. Josephson for the recommendation from the county planner.
Steve Josephson, City County Planner. You've got in front of you the final plat for Hospital Acres Second Subdivision. We have found that the conditions have been met, and there have been some minor cleanup things. The one thing that we ask is that in the notations, in the notes here where it refers to the stormwater, identifies the stormwater tract as a clarification saying that the hospital will be responsible for the maintenance of the stormwater facilities on site. And this is just a clarification and just to state what appears to be in the development agreement. And this way, there is the issue that we have is to ensure that it's clear who will be responsible for the maintenance. And that's the one thing that we've asked that this be added before it goes to City Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Any questions or comments for Mr. Josephson? This time I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Colash.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Hospital Acres Second Subdivision Final Plat as depicted in Attachment A as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, along with what Steve had added.
Thank you. Is there a second? In a second, any discussion? One item of discussion, it was in the form of a written memo from Parks and Rec that they had accepted the agreement between the Park and Rec and the CHI St. Joseph Hospital agreement regarding this subdivision. Is that correct, Mr. Kolash? Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Item 3 on the regular agenda is a final plat. To consider a request for a final plat of Fisher's Interstate 3rd Edition and a replat of Lot 1 of Block 1, Lot 1 of Block 3, and Outlot A of Fisher's Interstate 2nd Edition. The site is generally located in the northwest quarter of Section 1, Township 139 North, Range 96 East. Property is approximately 6.17 acres, and at this time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Commissioners, my name is John Wilczek from KLJ, representing Wesley Truck Center. Also present is Tom Hodson from Wesley Truck Center. We've tried to, and I think we pretty much have taken care of the items that were brought up at the last meeting as far as the preliminary plat. I did get an email yesterday in the afternoon. I have made those changes that were requested by Ed Corton. The only one that I do have new sheets if you needed to look at them. I think the only thing we had in question was that the right-of-way was not marked in the northwest corner of the property, and the other one was requested some little bit different wording in the heading as far as the final plat. Wanted to have it say final plat of Fisher's Interstate 3rd Edition consisting of replat of Lot 1, Block 1, and Lot 1 of Block 3, etc. Had some question about having the a detailed, I guess, written description of the property. We can put that on there. Right now, the only one we detailed out was the outlot, which is a piece of property that probably will be sold to the, or given to the adjoining property, because right now their parking lot and their facility is built on top of the city right-of-way. We're trying to make that work a little bit better. So, other than that, I guess I don't have anything else. I don't know if the commission has any comments or.
So you feel that that piece of property with the parking is something that can be taken care of?
Yeah.
As you go along, engineering has agreed with that?
What was that?
They've agreed with that you can work that out? Or is it?
We've got some details to work out with that yet. They will be signing the developers agreement. Right now, their parking lot is built on city right-of-way, and I guess I consider that illegal or whatever, but what we're trying to do is trying to work with them and have them maintain the same amount of parking they had, but yet take over part of the right-of-way, take back some of the right-of-way.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Kubas.
the attached agreement that goes along with the plat, and I believe it's a condition of the plat approval, is that that agreement signed. The diner is a part of that. I think it's maybe a 4-party agreement. consenting to the change of access right there. Right now, there's what will be 29th Avenue East and the access from the diner. They kind of conjoin right at the right-of-way line of the East Business Loop. It's not very good traffic flow right there. So a part of this replat will be to clean up the access for 29th Avenue, but it'll also change the access a bit for the Dakota Diner there as well.
And that looks like that's going to be worked through, not that we're going to go and possibly approve this, and then there's still going to be something of contention there that's not going to get resolved, that it will be resolved, do you think?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the development, it will be resolved. As part of your packet materials, you saw the development agreement. The applicant is in agreement to having that. Prior to this being submitted to City Commission, they have to sign that. So at that point, the issue will be moot because they would have agreed to the terms of that. This is, in essence, correcting problems that's been out there for a while, and staff's been dealing with this probably a year and a half, and we would like to see this approved today and put to bed.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this final plat, please feel free to come forward to the podium. Give us your ideas. If being none, anyone on the commission wishes to make further comment? This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a recommendation from our Community Development Director, Mr. Ed Corton.
We recommend approval, Mr. Chairman.
Been recommended by the city, by Mr. Corton. This time I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Skobash?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Fishers Interstate 3rd Edition final plat as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second, by Mr. Jackson. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carried, to recommend approval. Thank you very much. Item 4 on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a request for a rezoning from community commercial to low-density residential for properties located at 618 South Main Avenue and at 619 First Avenue Southwest in the Grass subdivision. Properties are approximately .68 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Morning.
Good morning.
I am one of the property owners, Shelley Nominack.
Okay,
I'm Jeff Seibel.
all right. And you feel this is pretty much in order what you want to do?
Yes, it is. We've
Yeah.
been living at this residence for 18 years and plan to retire there, so we'd like to see it residential.
All right. And what is, do you know, have all knowledge of what your adjacent properties are zoned?
The one next door to us is commercial,
Uh-huh.
and on the other side is residential.
Any other comments, questions for Ms. Nominick or Mr. Seibel? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Give us your,
Morning. I'm
Morning.
Brett with Mid-Continent Communications. We're a lot that's adjacent that's zoned commercial right now. Brian Gregoire is with our architecture group. We just asked that you consider the conditions contemplated in the staff report for Mid-Continent Communications variance application should not be subject to change based on the approval of the rezone. We also asked that the residents of the property that are subject to the rezone should be notified that they have been a non-conforming and The change in the zoning shall not entitle them to file any complaints regarding the contingency of the lots of the commercial zoning.
That sounds reasonable.
I'm sorry,
I can't,
Those, you want these as conditions of, Steve Josephson, City County Planner, you want these as conditions of rezoning? Could you restate them, please?
Sure. We're not asking you to not approve the zone. We just want to make sure that it's not going to affect what we have in the works right now. The variance that Mid-Continent has, or the application of variance that Mid-Continent has, should not be changed based on the approval of this rezone. And also, we ask that the residents of the property that are subject to the rezone be notified that they have been in a non-conforming use, and the change in zoning shall not entitle them to file any complaints regarding the contingency of the commercial zoning.
Mr. Josephson, would you comment on this?
Yes, sir.
I think all those
Certainly.
things are still in
Certain,
place.
yeah, certainly. Actually, the property they're talking about is actually on the other side of the street. You know, this is on the south side, and there's an intervening, their property is actually on the north side. And it is, they're going through the process, that's Mid-Continent's building, they're going through the process of a variance. It's a different process from this one. We do notify everyone within 300 feet of the variance of the public hearing of that. The property owners have been notified that currently what they had was non-conforming, and that was the issue. I know one of them tried to get a home loan to improve their home and couldn't get, was having difficulty getting it because it's community commercial. And that's why they're both here today, is they want to change it. They want to change it to R1. Whether you can, my understanding, whether you can put a condition in here saying, well, you were non-conforming, now you're not, and it sounded like, what was it? You couldn't make any adverse comments. Is that? That's where I'm having trouble understanding this, because it doesn't sound like a reasonable.
Right,
to me, it doesn't sound like a reasonable condition.
Sure.
So,
Our intention with this is basically just, like I said, we're in the process of the variance, so we just want to make sure that if they get rezoned, it's not on purpose of trying to
No.
disallow us to do anything.
no, it's not. The whole thing came up, as I said, the whole thing came up because one of the property owners tried to get a loan, and I know the other one had come to me about a year ago or so and had talked about this, and they just want to maintain the ability to live in their homes. This is not anything, and even if it was, it's not real. That's really not relevant to the rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Thank you. Any other comments?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much. Just I'm going to ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone. Please feel free to come forward.
Hi, my name is Greg Bertelson. I'm actually on the lot directly next door to them, which would be to the north of them on First Avenue Southwest. We'll probably come up a little bit later. We're requesting the same thing to go from community commercial to residential. We've been in our home 9 years. The houses that are in this have all been there over 30 years. When we bought it, we assumed it was residential. We've repaired it after the tornado, got the whatever you needed from the city to be able to do that, assuming that it was residential. I don't know that we're trying to prevent Mid-Continent from doing anything that they're doing. My concern with their request is if they decide to do something farther down the road and this contingency has been put in, would that prevent us then from saying something? That's my only concern, is if they're asking, that because we were community commercial and now going to residential, that it doesn't negate something down the road. To this point, from talking with Steve, it sounds like everything they're going to do is pretty much okay, but I don't want that to affect us down the line.
Thank you for your comments. This time I'd ask if there's anyone else who'd like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make comment?
For the most part, I guess Steve has told us pretty much what they're going to do, I think.
Yeah, I guess I have no objection.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other comments or questions? I'd just like to make comment from what I've seen in the past and from Mr. Josephson's comments that the variance process has nothing to do with this particular process here today. And to put any contingencies in here, I don't think would be proper. Those awarenesses and those contingencies are already in place for anyone that's going to rezone or ask for any type of special uses or variances on their property. Being the variances that process is separate from this and has already been in place, this has nothing to do with your application for a variance. And that variance should have nothing to do, from what we've been presented, with any rezone petition for these properties at this time. So that's my view of it. I'm sure an attorney could stretch it out for years. But I think from our experience here that everything is in order and the process is being followed properly. Any other comments or questions? This time then we'll close the public portion of this hearing. And I would ask for a recommendation from our AICP County Planner, Steve Josephson.
All those credentials. Steve Josephson, City County Planner. The recommendation is for approval. I just wanted to point out that this is in an area that's designated as residential in our future land use plan. So not only does this bring this into conformance with the use that's there, the uses that are there, bring it into conformance, but it's also consistent with our long-range plan. Staff recommends approval without condition and just as it is.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. This time I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the petition to rezone the parcels located at 619 First Avenue Southwest and 618 South Main Avenue from CC to R1 as being compliant with the City of Dickinson comprehensive plan, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Frederick. There's been a motion. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Ballesteros. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended. Thank you very much. Item 5 on our agenda, we have a rezone petition to consider a rezone, a request for a rezoning from community commercial to low-density residential for properties located at 580 South Main Avenue, 577 First Avenue Southwest, 585 First Avenue Southwest in the Grass subdivision. The properties are approximately 0.68 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Again, I'm Greg Bertelson.
Pat Barnhart and my wife Margaret, we live at 577 First Avenue Southwest.
And I'm at 585, and I think we're trying to do the same as the other party, just get it to match what the usage has been for years.
Sure. Do you wish to make any further comments then now? What's presented is fine. Anyone have any questions or comments for the Bertelsons or the Barnharts? Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? This time we'll close public portion of this hearing. And I'd ask our county planner, city planner, Steve Josephson, to make a recommendation, please.
Yes, thank you. Steve Josephson, City County Planner. Recommendation is for approval. Again, this is all in this area where it's residential on the future land use map, and it's a viable residential area. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. This time I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the petition to rezone the parcels located at 580, 585, and 577 First Avenue Southwest from CC to R1 as being compliant with the City of Dickinson Comprehensive Plan, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Is there a second to that? And a second by Ms. O'Brien. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approval. Thank you very much. Item 6 on our agenda is a final plat. To consider a request for a final plat of the Gladden subdivision. The site is generally located in the northeast quarter of Section 16, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. The property is approximately 29.91 acres. And I'd ask the party presenting to please feel free to come forward.
Brent Molson with KLJ. In regards to this plat, everything was submitted. One of the main comments that needed to be addressed was that the access easement shall be identified as a privately maintained road on the final plat. The notes on the final plat shall reference a privately maintained road to be maintained by a property owners association. And that has been added. The only other thing I'm aware of on this plat is whether or not directly below the title of the plat, Gladden subdivision, if it should also state includes a replat of a portion of the SKF subdivision. The legal description below certainly addresses all that, but I think there's some parties that feel that that statement should be added underneath the subdivision title.
Anyone have any comments? Can you make comment on that? Is that any problem, or is that?
I think it's more of an issue of semantics between surveyor and community development. We will meet with them prior to submittal to City Commission and come to some kind of an agreement one way or the other.
But it's easily identifiable the way
absolutely.
it is.
Yeah, yeah. It's an issue of should you have replat or should you not? Should it be a portion and get rid of replat? Because then it becomes a uniqueness, and I don't think the commission wants to hear a long debate over over a viewpoint of a legal description. But we'll correct that before we bring it to City Commission. Either way, it is correct. It's just an issue, a preference issue.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any questions, comments? Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make comment? This time we'll close public portion of this hearing. And I'd ask a recommendation from the county planner, Mr. Josephson, please.
Thank you, Steve Josephson, City County Planner. This originally came to you last month as a replat of the SKF subdivision, and one of the conditions was to change it, so it's been changed to the Gladden subdivision. Staff recommends approval. There were a number of conditions on here that both staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission had requested, and the applicant has complied with those. They've had discussions with the county road superintendent about road issues. They've made some other changes onto this, so that there were some changes as to what should be on a plat and what shouldn't. It's some of the wording, and they made those changes too. So we found that they've met the conditions, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. This time I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kovach.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the final subdivision plat for Gladden subdivision as depicted in the application materials, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Is there any discussion? Being no discussion, at this time I'd ask for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approval. Thank you very much. Item 7 on our regular agenda is a developer presentation by Barron's Vista. It's to consider a request for a rezone from AG to a PUD. The site is located in the southwest quadrant of the I-94 and exit 59. Property is approximately 283 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning. I'm Sean Sorn with Boundary Engineering, representing the Barron's Group on this Barron Vista project. With me today, also I have team members Steve Circle, Kathy Cronin, and Robert Andrew. Unfortunately, Larry Blankenship was unable to make it today due to some other commitments. So we're going to run through this project, give you an idea of what we're looking to do, try and get feedback from this commission before we bring the formal request to you. We've been kind of making our rounds. We've talked with Parks and Rec regarding the project. We've spoken with the school district. We had a meeting with city staff regarding it. And now we're here just trying to touch all the bases, I guess, before we put in our final submittal. We were here previously asking for the urban service boundary extension, which was graciously granted by this board and the city commission, which allowed us to get to this point. As you're aware, the site is on the southwest quadrant of exit 59, directly west of the Dickinson Hills project that's under construction right now. They're moving a lot of dirt just to the east of us. And then we go to the west the next mile. Kind of the area that we're focusing on, or give you an idea of the zoning elements that we're trying to capture. We do have a commercial element, which we're showing runs all the way along the interstate on the north part of our property, and then the east boundary of our property that abuts up to that Dickinson Hills development. On that east side, there's been a lot of talk about the mall and the 15-story hotel, and that's where that's looking to go, is on that northeast corner, with the good visibility to the interstate, the access with Dickinson Hills development, trying to complement the two. When we get to the west of that property, there's the big butte that sits out there right now, if you're familiar with the property. We're trying to use that as a feature in the development. And we're working with some other organizations to try and maybe get the Presidential Library to be a part of that, using that as maybe a park feature adjacent to that. Maybe an amphitheater, some other elements like that. So we're trying to keep that feature in place and utilize that as an asset to the development. And then as you move to the west a little more, that's where we're starting to get into more of our residential type development. As the PUD goes, what we're going to be coming in front of you with, the commercial, we're looking at being kind of our standard general commercial, following the city ordinance for commercial zoning, not really asking for any changes in that. All of the streets, we're looking at standard city streets, following cross sections that are acceptable, not asking for variances there. But when we get into the residential side, that's where we're looking to ask for some variances to the city code. Mostly because the component that the Barron's Group is trying to bring here is a house that is acquirable by the majority of the people in town. And right now that seems to be an issue, with housing being fairly high and difficult to build and keep those prices down. And one of the avenues that we're using to try and do that is to try and get smaller lot sizes in place. You know, maybe a little bit smaller home that brings the price down. This plan that you see in front of you, you know, there's no dimensions on the lots. Most of the single-family lots, as you see them here, are probably 46-foot front street frontage by 100 to 150 feet deep. So we're looking at a 4,500 square foot lot to maybe a 7,000, but probably trying to keep them down closer to that 45 to 5 to 5,500. And that's really the big change that we see from the city code, where we're asking for help with this planned unit development. If you look at your maps, you kind of see a lot of green space on it that show out parcels, with exception of the one kind of in the center of the map on the east side, where that's the oil well. The rest of them are drainage features, and it's space that we're looking to use to help when we get into the design of our stormwater and be able to capture that. And so we're trying to keep ample space available for us to work through those items. Access to the site has been another topic that's been brought up. Fairway coming through the Dickinson Hills from the business loop is our primary access. That's what we're looking at. Some other things that are in the works right now. You can see an emergency access on the northeast corner of our plat. We are working with Dickinson Hills, trying to come to some terms where we can come through their development to utilize that access for emergency. We also have 30th Avenue on the east side and 50th Avenue on the west side that we're in discussions with. We've met with Jody Arthod, owns the property south of us, and we've had a couple meetings with him talking about our development, so he's aware of what's going on. And you know, if either of those roads go through, we need to work with him as far as additional easements, right away, that type of thing, to make sure those section line roads get built appropriately. The other item that's talked about for future is on 50th, the possible overpass. I believe there's been some discussions with Roars in the city previously about an overpass at that location. We've been in discussion with Roars about that. We've been in discussion with the city. We're not necessarily opposed to that. We think that would be good for all the developments. It's a product of how we get that to come together and make it work for everybody. Let's see. Let me give you a rundown on the one map. It shows kind of the breakout of the percentages. The whole site's 283 acres. You know, we're looking at about 39 acres, or 39% of that being for the retail space. 0.2% we're calling flex. The flex, we're looking at a retail main floor, office second floor, apartment third floor, or office second, office third, or apartment second, apartment third, a mix kind of like that, a three-story structure, kind of like the downtown commercial type development. And then the townhouse, row house is about 3.3%. Single family, we're at 28% of the area. And then we've got 11% on the out parcels. In speaking with the school, there is some interest in a school site out here, so we're looking at that a little bit, and speaking with Parks and Rec, I think they're willing to work with the school. And the Parks and Rec would also like to have a park out here, so we're working on on a location for that. The park, we're kind of pushing to the southwest corner. We're looking, using that drainage area as kind of a feature, not necessarily putting the park in the bottom of the drainage, but we think it can be a feature to that, and it also brings the residential and kids away from what we're proposing as commercial area. We also talked with Parks about working with the school if they feel that a school's needed. We wanted to work together with them, because I think in the past, the schools have typically been parkland dedication that has been transferred or agreed to for the school, and James confirmed that with us. I believe he was going to talk with the school to see what their true desire was and if we can work together. One of the concerns we have is if the school's not really going to happen and we end up with 15, 20 acres out here, what happens with that? That's a lot of land just to sit if they're not really going to move forward with it. So, but that's an item that we're working through, and I guess looking for feedback from this commission on. In your packet, we've given you kind of some typical street layouts that we're looking at. The one unique one would be in front of the Flex property. It's 38th Avenue Southwest is what we're calling it. We are showing a diagonal parking on that street. With that, looking at that being more of a downtown commercial area, and the access to that would be from the street, not a parking lot. The access for the residential, there is an alley on the back side of that, so the residential component to that Flex would have a garage structure on that'd be accessed from an alley. And then Green Street, which is the street that we're taking all the way through the middle of the residential. We do have that cross section. We're looking for a divided road with a median, tree-lined street type development. So with that, I'll see if anything to add.
I'd like to make a couple comments.
I'll let Robert come up here and add a few comments if you wouldn't mind, and then we'll be looking for feedback.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Thanks for having us here this morning. I'm Robert Andrew, President of MAC Corporation, civil engineer, and I wanted to share with you just a little bit more about the global nature and the vision of this development. The Barron's Group is a very accomplished international developer. They own four-star, five-star hotels around the world. A very sophisticated organization, very well capitalized. They have the wherewithal to do what they set out to do, which makes them a wonderful client of ours. They made the trip here from Singapore and attended the meeting where we presented the expansion of the urban services boundary, I believe in December, and some of you had an opportunity to meet them firsthand. It's a quality organization, good people. They have a real vision that they're committed to for this development. The key and iconic figure of this development is this 15-story landmark hotel that they're proposing, which I think Sean eloquently presented and identified where it's located on this development plan. We hope to be in the final running on the presidential library. We think it's a good fit for this development. We think it builds synergy with what we're doing. We think we have great synergy with the Dickinson Hills development. We're working closely with Ron Radin and Brian Heimel there to make these compatible developments, provide good access between the two. And back to the residential component of this development, the mission has been, and they're committed to it. They've surveyed the market area, and they're committed to delivering an affordable product, not a down and dirty, trailer home type of development, but a quality, affordable product. And the nature of this PUD request, and we've changed it, we worked with city staff for the last, 3 months, I guess, and we've relaxed our request for smaller lots, and we've gone into something that we think is more of a compromise that still falls into the realm of a PUD, which allows us to ask for some variations to the standard development ordinance, and we're hoping you'll consider that and grant us the proposed PUD for smaller lots that allows us to reduce the cost of those units and still keep a quality product through design reviews and approvals as it goes forward. The Barron's Group is going to develop and build the hotel and shopping center. They will own that. They will probably develop and build other commercial real estate in this development, and they will develop and build out the residential component of this. So we will maintain control of it. We want it, once again, to be a quality but affordable product, and we need a little help downsizing the lots, increasing the density. And I think as this thing's progressed, and Mr. Corton can probably elaborate on this, or Mr. Kubius, but I think our initial development plan that we presented, and we met with Mr. Jackson and the mayor, I think we had 1,050 lots, plus or minus, in that original development plan, much smaller lots. And we got kind of a mixed reception. We got, well, maybe, but we don't know if it's a good fit for Dickinson. So we went back and reinvented it. The plan we've put before you today has reduced that density to approximately 655 residential lots. There is a little bit of variety here. Sean mentioned the flex lots and reviewed this footprint and kind of hypothetical plan with you on how those lots are configured. We want to have a mix of lots in a sliding price range that allows easy entry for the professionals in the community. They're getting priced out of the market. I deal with this issue not just in the oil patch. It's certainly very, very significant here. But I deal with this same issue everywhere I travel, and we work in, I think we're good to go in 41 states. And in major communities, the police and firemen and the school teachers and the young professionals that we rely on to make our cities function are getting priced out of the market. And they're kind of a target market for us in this development. And we're really committed to it. You can talk the talk. We want to talk the talk and then walk the walk. And we have to have your support to develop a plan that allows us to meet the benchmark pricing. We initially set out an entry-level price of $180,000. We're not 100% sure we're going to be able to deliver a product there. It's a little bit dependent upon lot sizes and some of our infrastructure development costs. But we want to be in that $180,000 to $240,000 range for the entry products in this, and then graduate up to, to move up homes so we can have a true lifestyle development here where people can work, play, and live within this development. So that's all I wanted to share with you, just to make sure you had the global vision for the entire development. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you very much.
If you have any questions, we'll be happy to address those.
This time I'd ask, anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Bryan?
I do have a couple questions. On the commercial development area that you have shown on the east portion of the map, I see a street coming in, and is that a 66 8-foot street that runs on, between, here. Yes, yes. Is that 66 feet?
I believe we had that planned at an 80-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
And 38th on the other side is an 80-foot as well.
Is an 80-foot? Okay. And also the street running east and west then that is joining up to the commercial on the northern boundary, is that 80 as well?
Empire, yes.
Okay. Because I'm envisioning trucks coming in to deliver to the commercial and having, once you deal with snow removal and those sort of issues, seeing some traffic congestion concerns.
On here, we're showing 80. You know, I think we're still flexible once we get into that design and working with city staff as to what's appropriate for those areas. We understand that that's our access for commercial, and we understand we need it to be adequate.
And then is Green Street an extension of Green Street that's on the other side of, it's, let's see, far to the east?
That's why it got labeled as Green Street,
Okay,
because
'cause
it
it
was
would
looked
line
at
up.
and it would match up.
Okay.
Certainly, the names are points of reference now if they're not appropriate. You know, we certainly don't have an issue changing street names.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Sean, what about access? There's been a lot of discussion about a second access point and how we're going to do that. You know, the Dickinson Hills is certainly dictating what you can do to the east.
Mm-hmm.
What have your thoughts been about access to the subdivision as a whole?
Well, we're still going to try and work with Dickinson Hills and try and make something work there.
And if I can interrupt you, what would that be? What do you, and if you can say?
Well, we're trying to get a cross-access agreement to where maybe we could tie it. They've got an approach north of Fairway. We'd like to be able to utilize that to help relieve some of the trips at the intersection of Fairway and the business loop, which is going to be a very taxed intersection. So we're trying to get some sort of a cross-access agreement that would maybe allow us to use that. The other items that are on the table right now that I see as options, 50th on the far west side. There might be an avenue of utilizing that. And we're speaking phase one, kind of the emergency access. So let me speak from that sense. That one could potentially be an option where maybe we build something that's not a full build out until we know the development's coming that direction, but it gets us an access that's reasonable for emergency and could be utilized for traffic to the site. 30th is one that we're talking about. One of the items with 30th, which comes right past the county shop, and how it ties in. And speaking with the fire chief, Mr. Seebach, of course, he has some concerns because that and Fairway come to the same point, and it doesn't necessarily give them an alternate. We've been discussing with Mr. Arthod to the south about a possible shifting of 30th up there to maybe line it up with that road that goes up past the mall, or something like that as a possibility. You know, and then the overpass is certainly still on the table as we move forward. But right now, I think our focus is really trying to get this first east side commercial done and the access that we need for that, which, you know, Dickinson Hills is obviously where we'd like to see it go. We feel that helps us the most. We feel it helps them. It creates continuity between those two developments. But if that doesn't work, we certainly have options to the south and even on the west side.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Can I interject something?
Yes, you may.
One thing I don't think we touched on today that's important in your consideration of this plan is we're planning this as a two-phase development. The approximate easternmost 125 acres, which comprises most of the commercial space, and I think, is that demarcation approximately here?
Yeah, I think it's right.
I think it takes up what we've identified as the townhouse, the flex space, and the commercial space on the eastern portion of the development. Is planned to be the first phase of the development. The second phase of the development would be everything west from there. So as we move west, we see the need to have some access on 50th Street, whether it be, ideally, we'd like to see the overpass over the highway. That's a big hurdle down the road a ways. If not, we would go to the south on 50th Street to tie back into the highway.
Is 50th the section line, Sean?
Yeah.
It is. Yep, thank you. Sean, do you see those accesses? They're almost essential, aren't they, at some point? For safety, whatever. Somewhere accesses have to be developed for this, other than one direction, right?
I believe at, full build-out, absolutely, 50th needs to be done, 30th needs to be done, the overpass should be done, fairways coming in. One of the items we don't know is Jody at this point doesn't have any development plans on the south part of this, but there may be other access in between there that comes down to 10 as well. And I think as we come together with this project, we'll see the benefits between Dickinson Hills and ours, and that cross-access will be essential too. The type of development they've got there with our commercial, they just work together.
Thank you. Mr. Josephson.
Yes, Sean, I have a question. I'm just looking at this because you've got Fairway Avenue and Empire, and then there's a significant amount of residential development in the middle. Have you considered the possibility of, the issues of cut-through traffic, which is, people trying to get from Fairway to Empire, and maybe they're not using 38th Avenue. They're going through some of the local residential areas, which it's one thing if you live in a house in that area and go to the commercial development. It's another thing if you say, 38th is blocked, I'm going to find a local road and shoot up, that way, and that's something that people in residential areas hate.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a...
Well, we certainly, yeah, and it's a good point. Yes, the short answer is yes, and we've had about, 15, 20 iterations of this residential, and this is kind of the one that we came to, but we're certainly open to discuss that more. And those are the comments we're hoping to get, so we make sure we're moving forward with the product that works for us and works for the city, and we're trying to be team players and get a product that everyone's going to be happy to see come to the community.
Any other?
Make one comment on that. I understand the need for that. I've lived in developments where we became a bypass, but it was driven, in my instance, it was driven by the fact that the primary thoroughfares weren't designed to accommodate traffic that was accessing primarily commercial and some retail development. And had those been planned with the proper width of thoroughfares and the logical means of navigating through the development which we've created here, it wouldn't have happened in my case. I think with the way the primary thoroughfares are laid out here, that traffic's going to take the path of least resistance. If there's a an accident, they're going to find a way to get where they're going. They're going to deviate around and go through the neighborhood. But there's really, in this instance, there's no driver to cause someone to go down and cut through the residential portion of this development to get to one of the commercial lots fronting the interstate. So I think that'll be minimized just through, you know, the normal logic of path of least resistance is my own comment.
And you wouldn't consider developing a residential area that would prohibit people from purchasing it because of traffic? They'd say, I'm not going to live here because the traffic's going to be bad here, so that's something you as a developer
That-
would hopefully have looked through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Sean alluded to, there's been at least 15 iterations of this plan, and it's been a topic of discussion. Kathy Cronin is a real estate consultant that's been involved in this. She's done an awful lot of work. She's been actively immersed in this design and development process. And my response to that, as an engineer, as an individual that's lived in those circumstances, the way this is configured, I don't see that as a impediment to our ability to market these properties and make them desirable properties. Key, again, is going back to, I've got a place in California, I've got a residence in Kansas City, I've got a residence in Killdeer, I move around a lot. In California, I ride a bicycle almost everywhere I go there. I live in a kind of a lifestyle development that's in a bicycle-friendly area, and I like riding bicycles, and a lifestyle community takes on kind of a different persona, I guess, and that's what we're trying to develop here. Again, it's back to the ability to, in California, I work and play and eat and shop and you know, conduct all of my daily activities within a 6 or 8 block area, and I can do it all on a bicycle. And we'd like to present something kind of like that here. It's unlike anything that you have currently in the community, and but the point is well taken. To make this marketable, we have to offer incentives to live here rather than disincentives to live here. And we certainly don't want delivery trucks running down through the middle of this residential development to get to one of the lots. But again, the logic is you come in that primary entrance on Fairway, as you come in a secondary entrance, the shortest course to get to those commercial lots is to go up those main thoroughfares and turn down the next main thoroughfare to get directly to your lot. I think it'll seek its own level in that regard.
Yeah, I think there's some innovative design things that can be done that can divert traffic away without blocking the street off. We just don't want to get in a situation where years later, and trust me, I've worked in places where we get plenty of calls about, you know, their cars coming through our neighborhood, and then you get people going for incremental fixes like speed bumps and stuff like that that really ruin the quality of life in the area. So this is a good time at this point to, you know, to take care of that, anticipate that. You're always going to have it, but, you know, given this system, I just see the potential for that.
Do you recycle in California?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
I have some comments on that. I don't.
I'm not from California. Let me clarify that. I'm a normal human being. So that's a different world entirely.
I personally believe that the traffic people can, and the people with development can work it out, figuring out how the traffic's going to flow. And there's always going to be those things that are not going to be able to be perfectly designed. But my thoughts on this are more of when you've mentioned Theodore Roosevelt Library. If you've linked that library to this property in any way, shape, or form, that's probably the biggest item here. And the extent to which that effort is being made. And for it to be successful, and for that library to be maintained and be user-friendly, inviting, and to be the library that people would envision. And I think everybody in this area, especially western North Dakota, and North Dakota's embraced him as a president more than anyone else, any other president, that is very significant. That there's been other people who are fighting for this library, want it. They want it for reasons that I don't think are, me personally, are valid, and I think everybody as a citizen should make a statement on them, because this is going to be a lifelong thing. That library should be a piece of quality, and it should be located where it can be accessible to everyone. I don't think it should be located where it's there because of someone's personal reason, because maybe they went to Dickinson State University or whatever. It's got to be attached to quality, and the quality is going to have to be maintained. Now, when I can sit and look at these buttes around Dickinson, it's a very beautiful sight. I was thinking about that the other day. We may not be sitting here looking at the Grand Tetons, but we're looking at some buttes a long ways away that are, for some of us, it's a gorgeous sight. It's very copacetic. It fits. And to put a 15-story motel there, I mean, that's going to have to blend in like sandstone. Because the people living in this development, they're going to be very close to that 15-story motel also, these fine houses that are going to be built in this unique situation. So I'm interested, how do you propose to put something like that in there and make it very eye-appealing? We're not living, like I say, we're not looking at the Grand Tetons, and we're not living in Singapore looking at, skyscrapers.
Yeah.
We don't want that. I don't believe we do.
And I agree. We have developed some renderings of the proposed hotel. They're very, very preliminary.
You can come to the podium, sir, please.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody would like to hear this.
We should have incorporated that into this package. We need to get that out to you. I think we've discussed it with Mr. Corton. It is a unique, iconic design, and there was logic incorporated into that design. Danny Lim, one of the directors of the Barron's Group, and Desmond Ong and their marketing department put a lot of thought into this, and it's actually has kind of a D shape to signify Dickinson, and they wanted it to be, and it is intended to have a lighthouse on top of it. They intend it to be. And I can't speak to that as eloquently as Danny Lim with the Barron's Group did, but they intend for it to be a focal point and a drawing point that plays off of the buttes and the hills in this area. And I had the same thought, ironically, this morning as I drove down 22 Highway from Kildare to Dickinson. I looked out on the horizon. In North Dakota, we have the most beautiful sunsets and most beautiful sunrises of any place I've been. And those buttes are highlighted by that lighting. I've got hundreds of pictures that I've taken from my residence at various times during the day at sunrise and sunset, and it's just incredible. It's awe-inspiring. We don't want to detract from that. We want something that is compatible with and fits in the community. And yes, it's going to be unique, and yes, it's going to be the biggest thing here, and yes, it is going to be a classy, well-designed, high-end. It's not a Holiday Inn. It's going to be a 4-star or 5-star quality hotel with meeting rooms and a small convention center, and the shopping center. We're planning about 200,000 square feet of retail and office space incorporated into that shopping center, which is joined at the hip with the hotel. It is truly going to be, I think, a landmark property. We don't get the opportunity in my world to go all out. Our company designs and builds everything under the sun, literally. What we're doing in California is casinos. They're fun, they're high-end. You get to let the design juice flow and do some neat things. This hotel is the neatest thing that we've ever gotten involved with. It's the greatest vision, and they're committed. They're absolutely committed to it. We need your approval to do it, of course, and we want it to be community friendly. We want it to fit, but it will at the same time certainly be a focal point and a draw. It'll be a neat beacon on the highway, I guess, to draw people to Dickinson and give people a destination and a reason to come here. At the same time, it'll give travelers, the business executives that come to Dickinson, a classier place to stay and a classier place to have meetings. You've got some neat facilities here. We use them routinely, and they're nice facilities. This is a step above all of those other facilities. We'll be happy to get you those renderings so you'll have a better vision of what that hotel represents. It's a pretty cool deal.
I would like to address the library too.
Yeah, thank you.
I have been working and
You
staying in
can
touch.
state your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Kathy Cronin, broker, working with the Barron's Group. I've been working with Sharon Kilzer and staying close in touch with her on what's happening there and where they're at right now. We want that on our site. That'd be wonderful, I think, for us. I think it'd be wonderful for the state. The visibility is wonderful, but they have the decision to make of where it's going. They have 3 sites selected, and they will make that choice, and all we can do is stay in front of them. We think ours is the best spot, because I think we have the view. We have the commercial that will go in, and it will tie into the library and the conference, and then the conference center with the hotel, and just the resources that will be provided within the community itself. But the Dickinson State University has been in charge of this for many, many years and has done a wonderful job. However, now they're bringing together a group of directors from all over the country that work with presidential libraries, and they will be the ones making the decision. And I think what's kind of unique and good for us is their timing is really good. I mean, we're in this process right now. They have had their architects looking at sites, and they will also participate in the decision of where it goes, but they are picking the site first and then designing the library according to where it goes. And I think they're going to be a step ahead of us, and it will be crucial for us when we design this hotel and tower to work with them. I mean, we want them to complement each other. We don't want them to be, you know, one standing out or taking a larger prominence, because you're absolutely right. That library will be very significant for the whole state, the country, and especially for Dickinson. So we want to work closely with that group, and we hope we're the selected site, but we don't know that yet. So I just wanted to share with you where that library committee is and how they plan to proceed. They will be looking at the site first. They'll pick the site, then they want to design the building to the site. And we can have the opportunity, I think, to design, to make sure that our materials and everything cooperates with that. And one thing, just the layout of the land, our tower might be 15 stories, but it's going to sit lower. That library is going to be up more on the buttes, so they will balance off, I think. But that's not my realm, and that's not my specialty, so someone will decide that, not me. But just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. O'Brien.
I have another question regarding the hotel and the light on the top, the light tower. Have there been any preliminary discussions with FAA in regards to the flight pattern from the Dickinson Airport going north, and any impact that the light or the hotel would possibly have upon that?
At this point, there have been none. You know, we're trying to get through some zoning. Obviously, that's something we'll have to do. When they say a lighthouse, I don't, you know, I think that is open for interpretation as to what that really means. And you know, we're kind of looking at a feature that does, makes a statement. It says you're at Dickinson, but, you know, from a lighthouse. I don't know that's going to have a light going around like the beacons of a true lighthouse would. You know, and I know that comment's been made. I don't think that's the intent. It was just by 15 stories standing out, you know, not being a negative to the surrounding area. We want it to be a positive, not a negative. So, you know, there's been talk about a restaurant on the top floor and observation decks and things like that. So, but certainly we got to go through those design elements.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll make a comment on that real quickly. We, in our company, we do airport work. We are doing 2 or 3 airport projects currently, and that will be something we'll obviously want to submit. Ultimately, it's going to be a requirement to light it appropriately. We're out of the flight pattern. I'm also a pilot, and I fly in and out of that airport routinely, and the way FAA looks at that, it's not going to, I don't think, extend out that far, but we will address that issue. They have a specific form that you submit, and it's a pretty routine process.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson?
Can one of you tell me, I realize that today is just discussion, that we're just looking at the project in general terms. When do you think you're going to be coming to us asking for some kind of formal approval, the PUD or whatever? Is that in the next couple of months, or do you see it next spring, or what?
Next month.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal is next month, or the next couple months for sure. We'd like to try and have some.
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
you know, I think the thing we have to remember, all the discussion about hotels, libraries, schools, whatever it may be, that's not what we're going to be approving, if we approve this. We're going to be approving land use and layout and the detail that goes with all of that. But it's all conjecture right now, and it may happen. I hope you guys are successful with what you're trying to do. But that's not what we're going to be approving. And we have to remember that if we approve this, it could end up being a totally different type of building, type of retail, commercial, residential than what's being discussed here today. As far as the density and street width issue, I'm trying to be open to that, mainly because we are really in a need for R1 type of housing in this community. We have to remember that we've really discouraged it in the past, and we've actually disapproved it on more than one occasion in the past. So we have set some precedent that way. It doesn't mean we can't change our mind. I wouldn't hesitate to change our mind if we think it's good for the city. But I also don't want to do something that's going to be there forever just to try to solve this bubble as we work our way through the bubble. So, you know, I'm trying to be open to that density street width issue, but personally I'm going to really scrutinize that. The last thing is that we do have in process, call it an extension of our comprehensive plan and the sub-area plan, and maybe Mr. Croton wants to remind all of us about that for a minute here, but I would want to see this happen at least simultaneous with that, if not after it. And I think that will work, because I think that's going to be complete this fall, late fall or something. No? Okay, yeah, by the end of the year. So, you know, I don't see that as an issue, but I would want to make sure that we coordinate that. And then maybe the last thing, that access issue, even though it seems like a detail, we're going to really need to know the answer to that. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. And on the West Area Development, Mr. Croton, do we have a meeting, is it September 12th? So that will be, we're in the process of doing, looking at several thousands of acres on the west side of Dickinson, and how it's going to develop, and roads and infrastructure and just about everything in use. And that meeting will be September. It started about 3 months ago, the initial meetings. September
22nd. Mr. Chairman,
22nd?
September
Okay.
22nd,
September
yes,
22nd.
9 to 11.
Okay. And so I think we need to get all our thoughts into Mr. Josephson and Mr. Creton on this, on if this is going to be a PUD, and it's going to be, I think the thing about it is the uniqueness of it, and our main, you look at it, it's going to be, you know, zoning, land utilization. But it's such a significant thing about the impact and a reflection on the city of Dickinson, and that if there is a library there and there's other stuff, and the quality there, and all the PUD stipulations that can be written in, whether it be the walking paths, the bicycles, the recycling, I mean, it's potential to do a whole lot of things the way this land is used to make it so unique that to avoid something, a quick fix, like Mr. Jackson says, for low-cost housing, that this is going to be there for hopefully long-term, not just a, you know, something where, because we have pressure here, extreme pressure to provide housing, or try to help provide housing for those people that would like to live here and work here and yet can't afford to, with the housing is restricted. Mr. Josephson.
I just wanted to clarify this according to this map here. So is the PUD only for the portion that's shown as residential within the broken, those dotted lines, and then?
That's a good point.
Yeah, so the PUD doesn't actually apply to the commercial. What you're proposing doesn't apply to the commercial.
That's what's on here today. Because of the commercial, we felt, let's just go back to the standard commercial. I think we're still open in those discussions if you feel it should be for everything. But we're really, the change that we're looking for from the city code is dealing with lot sizes on the residential. And that's why you see what you've got there. I mean, we're not asking for street width changes. We're not asking for, the one item is the hotel and the commercial and how we want to address that, but.
But the commercial is outside the PUD. That would be, we're just looking at standard, what's the CC zoning?
GC, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just
Yeah,
bring
Mr.
up some
Berton.
issues just for you to consider and think about. These are the issues that I've been dwelling upon for several months with respect to the development. I mean, generally, I'm in favor of that. There are issues that are, a lot of issues that are still unresolved that we have question marks with respect to. Anything that's going to be contrary to our existing code, and I've let Mr. Soren know that, needs to be spelled out, illustrated. In essence, what I would require would be, in essence, a handbook that would show everything. So anybody could look at it and determine, okay, this is the reason that you need a PUD for this portion, because these are the relaxations that you're proposing, and for anybody to understand that. That's going to take some time in order for them to do that and to clarify that issue, but that needs to be specified. And if the commercial is strictly commercial as is, then at that point we would remove that. But you want to be careful on any kind of requirements with respect to the commercial, that if there's any deviation to the code, that needs to be there. Otherwise, we'd have to apply that code or come back through an amendment for that. And I know you know that, Sean. Oil wells on the last one, the last page, there are a lot of wells that show probably what I would say abandoned ones, but there's not a clarification on that matter. That will dramatically impact your development. The survey from Johnson Surveying, we will require that every single one of those wells, proof that they are abandoned and cannot be used in any way, shape, or form. We're running into a situation potentially in the city where we had presumed that there was an abandoned well, and they are going to go and try to go from a formation deeper and within an existing residential area that could dramatically impact that residential area. So we want to make sure that those wells are abandoned, and if anybody, and if they wanted to come back in the future, if they have mineral rights in order to do anything, that they would have to go through the Public Service Committee and the city as well. So make sure of that as part of your development. That will be a condition that we'll attach for that. It sounds like that you're going to be the master developer for this project. Is that kind of the indication? With that, density is going to be the biggest issue, and I know Commissioner Jackson has already talked about that. I've already had several developers that have talked about reducing our standard lot size for R1 from 7,500 to less than that because of the same issue, the cost of land, cost of development, and the rest. And instead of allowing this particular development to be granted that, I think you need to really consider, are you open to the idea of changing the regulations with respect to that? So that's something that you need to really think about. The design I presume, is going to be continually innovative, and you could base your decision with respect to that. As staff will require renderings, building elevations. They're the master developer, so they should be able to tell us what the product will look like. I think that you should get a high standard development if you're going to reduce those lot sizes, and if you're not comfortable with it, then require regular lot sizes. That will be part of the negotiation with the developer on that. I am probably the only person that is a naysayer on the tower height. I still do not agree with the tower height. I'm not convinced that 15 stories this is the right area for it. I'm going to recommend, at least if they came through today, that it would stay at 6 stories or 60 feet high. I'm not a proponent of a lighthouse. I've lived next to cell tower sites, and the flickering of the light is annoying. And I've had many people say that. You look at night, you want to go outside, and the last thing you want to see is a flickering of a light or a constant light that is out there. That's my personal preference. You'll have to make your own decision with respect to that, but I'm not in favor of that with respect to it, and they're aware of it. Let me just flip through some other areas with respect to it. The second access needs to be resolved. Obviously, you're going to be discussing that with fire department with respect to the project itself. Let's see. And I'm just bringing up these particular issues, Sean. It's not that I'm opposed to the project in any way, shape, or form. I like the project. It's just that we've had so much conversation. I want you to be aware of the issues that I have concerns with that we still need to resolve. And then the townhouses that you're proposing a significantly higher density than what our current townhouses would be like, so that needs to be a very innovative design. What I'm seeing is that if you built the townhouses per your project, it'd be 15 units per acre, which is comparable to our apartments. I would find that hard to justify with our other department developers that I've granted you an ability to have apartments when I'm telling them no, they can't. Even though it's a townhouse design, it's still the densities per unit based upon what your lot size is, and the total number of units would be 15 or plus units per acre. So that's going to be a tough one. That's going to be a tough sell. I'll have to answer with Roars and Myers, and they constantly, and Mike Cook constantly ask for the same thing. Why can't I have greater density? I've proven myself. I've been here in the community. So those are some of the issues that I do have. Obviously, we'll have discussions in the future. I like the commercial side of the project, the mall, with respect to doing single family and also the townhouses and flex. It's just the question, the biggest issue as I'm struggling with is the density, and how do I equate your project compared to other ones and look at it and be consistent with decision making. So that's going to be kind of the challenge. And I don't know if any of the commissioners want to comment on any of those issues as well. So.
This time I'd ask if anyone wants to make comment. I think it's a good time to make them, and then later on down the road, either reiterate them or give your comments to Mr. Curtin again.
Mr. Chairman, I had one comment, and it again involves access. I think I do like that we have two east-west thoroughfares coming through here with Empire or whatever it would be called, and Fairway. Again, we need to be consistent with the West Area Plan. As that develops, I think we just need to keep making touches with that West Area Plan as it evolves, because there'll be 15 iterations of that as well. On the north-south axis, I do believe 30th will develop into some sort of street. Again, that's not going to continue any further to the north beyond the interstate, so I think that'll be a lesser road. 50th Street, I think all parties involved agree that, at some point there'll be an overpass there. When that might be, 5, 10, 20 years, I don't know. But, so that'll be a more significant thoroughfare. I think we have to remember that more than likely, if and when development happens to the south, there'll be another street, maybe two. Again, I don't know exactly how that drainage way comes through. It'll affect where that lines up. But it goes to Mr. Josephson's comment about cross-access, in that I understand the development. I think these 66-foot streets through the residential development makes sense. But keep in mind that there will be another thoroughfare between 30th and 50th where it might make sense to have one of those 66-foot streets be maybe something more like the Green Street cross-section that you had shown, because I think there will be some cross-traffic, not through the development internally, but from areas to the south. So other than that, I like the access. I wish we had another access, and I hope you're successful working with the Dickinson Hills development on making some more access out to the west, because or to the east, because Fairway will be very busy. So that's all I had.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
One other detail with that. Mr. Kubis, isn't the final plat in Dickinson Hills, isn't the alignment of Fairway, when it meets this subdivision, different than what's shown here?
We did. Dickinson Hills, where it meets the section line, I'm not sure on this drawing, but they came in at a 90-degree angle to that section line of 30th.
That could affect your layout.
Well, we'll look at that. We had originally brought the 90 to us, but it was looking at Dickinson Hills changing that. Theirs came in at an angle, and this one, we thought we had adapted to theirs to bring it all, because originally we had Fairway staying north of that quarter line a ways, and we changed.
See, I don't think it ended up the way you're showing it on that drawing that you have.
It did not. Okay. We'll look at it, but originally we're the ones that brought this in at a 90 and then brought it through here, Fairway. Mm-hmm. And then because of a comment that was made at our city meeting, we lined this up here and kept what we thought was the same angle they brought it into the section line, and then continued it down with our radius.
That plat?
We'll verify it.
Been finalized?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think Commissioner Jackson is correct in saying that it does come in at a 90, but relatively, I would say, in the same area. So whether or not, through negotiations, they might want to replat and continue that angle, it would be a minor adjustment to this layout to do just what you're doing and bring it back down to the quarter line. So I don't think it's a major issue, but something that does need to be correlated with their alignment.
Well, is there a desire from the city for us to get Fairway down on that quarter line, or could we keep it at where it 90's in there? Because originally that's where we brought it through, and then we had, development on the south side of Fairway too. We changed this because we thought we weren't going to be able to adjust that line.
I guess my preference would be on the quarter line, but it's not.
This is how we originally, this is where we turned it here.
And that's how it generally is right now. I don't think I'm set to have the Fairway Street be on the quarter line. In general, we just want these major thoroughfares every half mile is how the Dickinson Comprehensive Plan laid them out. Whether they're on a quarter line or a section line, sometimes terrain or drainage or property ownership makes it desirable to keep it off of a section line or a quarter line. In this case, I don't know what distance that was north of the quarter line where the Dickinson Hills alignment of Fairway comes in. If it's 100 feet or 500 feet, I don't recall. But.
Thing, if you get down on the quarter line, then you got that issue with the adjacent landowner. If you're going to give the entire 80 feet, or if you're going to try to get 40 from the adjacent landowner, and you have that darn issue all the time.
It's a challenge for us, right? Well, I was going to say, I think in our discussions, it would work better for us to be up, but
Hi, my name is Mel Wango, and I'm here representing Jody Arthod, who has the land south of this development. And I've sat in with a couple meetings about, you know, what they're planning to do and what they would kind of need from Jody. So my understanding is that Jody would have to approve any changes to 30th or 50th. I guess those roads are 33 feet right now, and they would need at least 60 or 80 or 120. Somehow they would need Jody to approve an easement to actually make those roads work. So it sounds like Empire and Fairway are, as they're planned now, would be enough for all the commercial on the east side. But actually to get the phase 2, all the housing would probably not be approved until those roads were approved by Jody. So I almost wonder if this, and obviously, you know, we've been discussing it for an hour and a half, it almost seems too big to just approve as it is. And maybe they almost need to do phase 1 zoning approval as its own, as if the phase 2 wasn't gonna happen, just because there is, you know, the issue of needing the second road to even get that approved. So if you approved all of this right now, you might only be getting the commercial. And if your heart is in getting the low-income housing, it might not happen.
To answer your question on the second access point, it will be required for the commercial. Before we could
Oh.
issue any building permits, it's going to have 2 access points approved by the city engineer and by the fire department. So the issue of that second access point is a paramount issue as part of this development. And if they want to go through your property as part of that, which is most likely going to have to be the case, then they'll have to work with you, with your client on there.
So you being here means that he's a giving person, and it's up for negotiations, is that correct?
You know, he hasn't made up his mind, yes or no. I think ideally, you know, he has no plans to develop, so ideally I think he would just love to see this as farmland forever. That's what it was when he bought his property. Obviously he can't decide that, but he does have issues with, you know, if there's a bunch of houses right along his road, what's to keep those people from going onto his property and hunting? If there's a park here, how do the people, you know, where does the park end, and are people going to come onto his road or his land, that kind of thing. He obviously will have issues, you know, with an easement for 50th or 30th because he kind of got burned on an easement project that just happened on his land. They kind of destroyed a good chunk of his property, tore out a lot of trees. So, you know, any human being would be hesitant after that happens to them. And also, the sewer hasn't really been discussed much, but the sewer for this will also have to get an easement from Jody, it sounds like. So, I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of things that would have to be approved and go through for any of this to happen.
Appreciate you being here, and thank you for your comments. And to answer your question, Mr. Corton, I too, I'll make comment on what you said. I do agree with you about the height and the light. And I was sitting outside looking at the western stars, and I could still see the Big Dipper and the North Star. But off to the northeast, there was a big bright glow. You could not see any more stars. But I must comment, my church neighbors have turned off their lights in their parking lot that's not being used at night earlier, so I don't have their lights shining on me. But yes, I think that's significant. The height, the light, the features as they blend in with what we have here now. And I still think that that's a significant issue if we tie Theodore Roosevelt, and it has been linked with this property now, that's significant. And that's part of planning, might not be zoning, but there's an issue there that quality of that particular library is going to reflect upon us as every individual that lives here. And we want to ensure that that is a quality place when people come here, that stands out. That's going to be the most significant thing in this whole project, by far and large. You can build a shopping mall, you can build housing, you can build whatever, but you don't build a presidential library every day. That is the most significant thing in the whole project, I think. And that has to be accessible, the timeline that has to fit into apparently a phase that is going to go on the speed of whatever the selection committee for that site is, which is separate from this. So I believe my comments are on that, is that's the most significant thing of this project. And we need to facilitate that with access. And however they phase this in, that has to complement that library. As far as sewer, water, I think you know the timelines, the guidelines, how much of this, how fast it gets built. Is the infrastructure going to be available? Is the water going to be available next year for all this commercial and all this housing, if it gets built out, and how fast? Those things, the engineers, I think, are going to answer. And the city people who deal with that are going to know those answers fairly close.
If I could just add a comment to that, you know, we all understand there's a lot of challenges in front of us when it comes to how we're going to access, how we're going to get the streets built, water, sewer. You know, part of that challenge is finding out what type of entitlement we have in front of us to design to, so we can start that phase. You know, it does us no good to go and try and negotiate street right away with Jody Arthod and buy that if we can't get the zoning that we need to make the land work. That's the challenge that's in front of us right now as we're working to try and acquire easements for sewage. And, you know, if we don't need the sewer there, then what's the point of even going and talking with him and trying to acquire that? You know, we're making him aware of what we're trying to do. And that we may need to come, and we're going to have to work with them. We fully understand that. But if you don't approve the residential zoning, for example, then it's a moot point. So the effort, you know, there's no sense in acquiring it or buying it and moving forward that direction. So I think a lot of those items, if we can get approval of the PUD and some of the zoning, then yeah, as we're platting and as we're bringing the development forward in the development agreement, we're going to have to answer a lot of those questions, and second access is certainly a huge one that has to be worked out before I would anticipate you're going to allow the development to even start, or certainly building permits or construction permits, you know. But this is step one of many that we're going to have to go through for a development of this size. And we realize that.
Thank you, Mr. Soren.
Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, that's the reason that they are coming through just the PUD. When they came through with the urban service area, as part of the analysis from our consultants for water and sewer, we know that they're about a year and a half out until really they're ready for development. They're aware of that particular issue. The key is going to be you know, as they move forward, will they get the land use issue? And that's what we're talking about today. The road alignments and everything else, those things all be addressed specifically as the platting, or at least the civil plans that are attached if they retain ownership and they don't plat. I mean, they could do the commercial side. They have ownership of that. They could come in a year and a half and decide to work on the commercial before platting on the particular property. Nevertheless, those issues will be addressed, but the key is going to be the land use issue, and that's what I was addressing earlier today. And what they need to hear from you is your thoughts with respect to it, so they can have their final submittal and go through the approval process.
Thank you, Ms. Corton. Mr. Ballesteros.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. I'd like to, about building in phases, the young lady that spoke about that, is it our desire to also include the residential? Because it seems as though sometimes some of the other housing developments I've seen, they're built to appease because there is the desired residential product for the city anyway, but the developer desires to have the commercial product instead, which I'm sure is more profitable. The young lady that spoke earlier, she had mentioned, you know, what about the intention to do it in phases? Is that something that maybe you would like to do, or that we would like to consider rather than that? Just the commercial element take off initially, or?
Well, we've had this before in other developments, and Mr. Corton probably can answer that, but basically, you know, instead of someone just throwing out a huge plan and saying, I want to do this in this phase, and yet their real intention is just to do the commercial and heck with the rest. That they'll never get to phase 2, 3, or 4. Mr. Cortana could probably make comments on that, how we would regulate the phases and make sure they are done.
Well, the question comes about is how you want to do your entitlement. I'm comfortable if they just wanted to come in and just do commercial. I mean, if they just came in today and never even brought the entire piece and only brought in the commercial portion, I think we would be comfortable with looking at the commercial itself. I understand that as development occurs, you're going to go after probably your most profitable issue. Commercial is as we grow as a community is more and more necessary, just as much as housing is in some ways. The people that live here would like to have more options as well. So I don't think in this particular development, at least from my perspective, that I would require that you have to do half commercial and half residential at a time. I'm comfortable with allowing them to develop it as long as the conditions that we have for the residential and commercial pieces are all comfortable with that. Some developments that we do, there are situations in which we want to have phasing for that. An example would be if you were having a project and there was amenities associated with that. I personally like to require that those amenities are built right away, because there's no guarantee that that pool or rec room will be built after half the units are done. So that first person that buys that lot and builds that house should have the same right as the last person that comes into that development. So that's where you would front load some of the amenities. But in this particular project, I don't see that as necessary. But that's up to you as part of your discretion as well.
I've just seen grading take place on the residential portion of it, and then all of a sudden the commercial comes up and it's like, that kind of just from Watford City anyway, some of that. The city does want housing there, but everybody wants to put some of these kind of flex projects or flex things.
And we could look at that. We could just say if you're unwilling, you're not going to do the residential piece, then we'll only allow the grading for the commercial piece. Normally, developers want to grade it all at the same time. They're paying the cost, to bring that out. But that's something for you to consider and say, the residential piece may not happen for 5 years, or it may never happen at all. Let's only grade what you're proposing on doing. And that's how we've normally done it. So if they come in for their first plat and it's only for the first phase of the commercial, that would be fine. And we have, on times past, only allowed the grading for that plat, not for anything beyond that point. And that's pretty standard for us to do.
And sometimes it just seems like that's where the cut and build to match up for
Correct.
pushing those products over there.
No, it's a good point with respect to the grading issue.
I just want to say on the residential part, the residential is going to be crucial to our development. You all know the need for housing right now, and we need that housing. We need those families that are out there that haven't been able to move their families to town because of housing. We need those workers to be able to provide employees for this commercial. And I know Barron's is very adamant about that housing, and that has been #1 priority for the mall, and the residential has been #1 priority for them, and they fully intend to go ahead with that residential. And I know that they would like to do it as quickly as possible, if not, maybe not simultaneously, but right with that commercial. And they want to look at the whole thing because they want that housing in. They have designs. They are working with different architects on designs right now for those housing. We could have brought them today, but then we kind of get into who likes what design. We're going for just zoning today, and we need the zoning to be able to bring you those houses next month or the month after when we are back. I just wanted to fill you in on that.
Be aware, I'm sure they'll be talking to Mr. Corton, Mr. Josephson on design in PUD. I think they play a significant part in that. And being you've just made that statement, I don't think they'll be at all shy about prioritizing that in that PUD.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brown?
I have another question. You'll all find out that I'm really strong about visual appeal of things. And one of the things that when I'm looking at the map and I'm looking at the residential and then the commercial right across the street, and I'm thinking of being one of the people in that home, is there any type of plan in place for some type of barrier or visual, to break up the R1, boom, right across the street, commercial?
Yes, and that's certainly a very valid question. Larry Blankenship, the gentleman that is our designer that has orchestrated this evolution of this plan to date, wears a lot of different hats. He's also a very talented landscape architect, and he's done world-renowned projects, literally. He's won more design awards in foreign countries than anybody I know has won in the United States. He's a real high-caliber guy. That has been an ongoing topic of discussion. Yes, we need to have some landscape buffers, berms, and plantings that will segregate the commercial from the residential development as well. We wanted to have a little bit of hierarchy in this development as well, and it's not necessarily represented here real well in how we, move towards the more high-end stuff. But that's why we've used, as you see, the flex and then the townhouse units that are separating us from the highest intensity of the retail and commercial use towards the east end of the development, to allow that to kind of step down in the hierarchy of the development and the intensity of the use. So, and to the north as well, with architectural buffers to create some isolation and segregation between the two, certainly. And that's a necessary element just from a logical marketing standpoint. That's a good question, though. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bridger.
I just have one question for Ed. Is it our intention to bring Arthod's piece into the city as an annex in at some point?
Repeat that again?
I mean, is it our intention at some point bring Jody's piece into the city as, annex that piece in?
That will be, that issue will be looked at as part of our West Dickinson plan. Okay. So as part of the plan is all the infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, where those would be land use issues, and then also an annexation plan as well.
I guess my only concern is, if he's going to hold those thoroughfares, we have to get easements from, we don't want another Chenango situation where we have a huge parcel of land right in the middle of the city that we can't do anything with because he won't grant us permissions to put any sewer lines through or streets through. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a concern. It doesn't sound like he's really tipping in the direction of, he wants to.
Right. I can understand your question. I think on this one here, the developer has been aware of that from day one. We told him that they would need to find a second access point. So they're aware of that particular issue. It's not anything that, halfway down and when you're designing your plans that they need to resolve that issue. So, that's a discussion, obviously. If you feel that that issue needs to be resolved prior to an acceptance of a PUD, you can. But we will definitely make sure that issue is resolved before they plat or before they can get any building permits and the rest.
Well, I guess more of my concern is if he's not on board, do we just not develop that area?
It could be, if he's not on board and doesn't want to grant anything and holds to it, and those are the only access points that are really viable for this project, then this project doesn't move forward.
But that's pretty viable for that whole area.
Right.
Not just this acreage, it would be anything to the future, so.
As another point of clarification, 30th Street and 50th Street are currently, there's dedicated right-of-way there. It's only 66 feet wide, but it's on those quarter section lines, and it's established currently. So that would have to be taken into consideration, and if they're not willing to grant additional right-of-way to get us up to from 66 to 80 feet, then we've got to look at, what type of street do we build there? But I don't think we're completely shut out from our ability to use 30th Street and 50th Street as access points to our development.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I guess to bring up the question, this is one of the problems that you have when you develop on the periphery. instead of, developing as you would normally, going from a point and then moving over. Second access point is going to be a big issue here. That's a discussion for us to have. We could put that as a condition as part of the PUD if you wanted to, that issue needs to be resolved before it's fully vested in. Then they know that, and then they'll have to do negotiations. But I would presume that, let's say sometime this year this project is approved, that their next step would be working on that access point, would be the first thing that I would do as a developer. And if that can't work out, then this project waits until such a time as the city decides that they want to put those roads in as part of a systematic development plan, and that would be part of the annexations that we do have. So it's another good reason for our West Dickinson plan as well, is to be able to have timing issues with respect to road corridors.
Any other comments or questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I had one other comment for the applicant. When we had seen a previous iteration of this, there were many more alleys. Now it looks to be down to one or two, I guess, through 2 blocks. Previously, those alleys were shaded like a gray. They were going to be the ownership of a homeowners association or some private group that was going to maintain alleys. Can you talk a little bit about the alley that we're proposing now, about maintenance, utilities, garbage pickup?
We really only have one thoroughfare, which I'm going to call an alley, and that's between the Flex and the townhouse development. We went away from the traditional neighborhood development plan that had the rear-loaded garages and the alleyways based on the previous discussions that we had in the previous meeting. This street will be a paved street and there'll be a common area maintenance fee associated with the townhouses and Flex Tech, as is typical in all of those types of developments. And that will be the vehicle that provides for the maintenance of that one alleyway that's left there that allows for the rear load garages.
And then I know it's getting to minute details here, but what we talked about earlier, dry utilities in that alley, water and sewer in the street as typical. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else wish to make comment? Try to get any comments you can into engineering, Mr. Catan, Mr. Stevenson, Mr. Josephson, on this. Anything you have in mind, because they're going to be looking at developing a PUD on this property. So if you have further comments, get them to them, because in the next month or so they're going to have an overload of work. And then approximately a week after our next meeting, there will be a West Area Development meeting also. So between now and then, there's going to be a whole lot of information they would like to have ahead of time, so they don't hear something too new at those times.
Could I ask one more question for clarification purposes? The West Area Development meeting, I think Mr. Corton alluded to the fact that it's a possibility that the city may want to plan for the improvement of some thoroughfare through that property. You have a vehicle at your disposal, which is not necessarily a vehicle that people have appetites for, and that's eminent domain through, as part of your development of that West Area Development plan. Is that a vehicle that you would consider to allow the improvement of 30th and 50th Street as you kick that around?
That is always a possibility, but I don't think the City Commission has used that readily, and that would be a discussion item. I think it's way too premature to discuss that at this point.
Sure. One more question. What do you see as the outcome of your West Area Development meeting? What's your goal for that?
It's the results. We've had one meeting thus far with the neighbors within the entire area. We're going to come back with alternatives on August 28th, which is noted out front. Then from there, based upon those comments, we were going to come back with a draft plan. It's not going to be as specific as a final version, but it's going to be a draft that covers goals and policies and the alternatives and get input with respect to the Planning Commission, obviously the public, and then City Commission as well. So September and October, we're going to have 2 joint meetings, and then from there, we'll finalize the product and come through the approval process, if all goes well, November, December.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you could always, you know, being a landowner for that, you could always discuss that with our consultants that are working on it. And the plan itself, just for the public, is the same website that we had for the comp plan, dickinsongov.com. We will have a link that's for the city site for it, but I believe it's dickinsonplan.com is the website for it, and we are constantly updating as we have information for the public.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Pavash.
You know, on behalf of the Park District, I would have a few comments, but we've been talking about this for a while now. It seems like it's a long ways away. The only thing I ask is make sure that you do get together with us before you get too far along. I know you've had discussions with James.
I think
but-
we're on the meeting on the 29th
Okay,
to do
I was
the
going to say,
same
because we
thing.
haven't with the board yet, so
Yep.
just before it gets too far along, we need to do that.
Yeah, we're going to bring this same package to the board on the 29th.
And the other thing is, you know, we talk about phasing, which is always scary too, especially to us, because it hasn't proven to work real well for us. But it sounds like the first phase would be entirely commercial. Am I correct?
It's not actually defined. You know, there was a land area that was defined as Phase 1. Barron's absolutely wants to include some single-family in Phase 1
Okay.
of some sort.
Okay.
So that boundary, we're still working on where that's going.
Well, and that gets to my next comment is in the past, that's where we run into problems where, you know, we want to look at the entire development as far as parkland goes, but then all of a sudden you have this phase, and that's all we're looking at, and it might be a fraction of what we should really have. And so I want to look at it as an entire development and hope that it comes through so that if we are looking for land for potentially a school, you know, we have that capability. And one other question, just to try to put it in perspective, as far as talking about the hotel and 15 stories, whatever it ends up being, I'm trying to visualize just how high 15 stories is. Does anybody know how many floors the Capitol is in Bismarck?
Thought it was 18,
Okay, so it's similar.
similar to that, correct?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Any other comments at this time? Being none, I appreciate everybody's comments. We do, and I'm sure the developers do, and so do our planners. At this time, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Chapter 39 zoning and Chapter 34 subdivision of land, definition of subdivision and increased setback distance for off-street garages. This time I'd ask Mr. Corton.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. I have 2 items to talk about today, 2 items that have been on my list to address, and they've risen up to a high standard at this point. I am, just to let everybody know, both myself and Steve Joseph are working through the zoning code, and we're going to come back sometime this year, if not first part of next year, with a significant revision to the zoning ordinance to correct a lot of issues that are ambiguous or provide some interpretation, try to clarify those issues. We're not going to do a full rewrite to the code, but we're going to bring forth a lot of changes. And prior to that, I would like to probably set up a special meeting sometime the latter part of this year and just go over them and then get your inputs before I formally submit them. But today I have 2 items on the agenda. One is the amendment to the subdivision regulations. Currently, our subdivision regulations talk about lots that are 40 acres or above that you don't need to plat, or if you have a platted lot and you decided to rezone the property, there's not a mechanism to require them, or there is a mechanism in our subdivision regs, it's just that it's unclear. So in order to clarify that issue, I proposed an amendment to the subdivision regulations on the first page of my staff report, at the bottom, highlighted in bold, at the very end of the definition of subdivision, which is part of Chapter 34 in the subdivision regs, says, in addition, any rezoning of property shall require platting in conformance with this chapter. In essence, what we're saying is that even though it's an unplatted parcel, we are requiring it to be platted. And that will take care of any ambiguity, and then that'll also allow us to obtain right-of-way that is necessary for us to move forward on a lot of street projects. Before, we had only till recently interpreted the subdivision regs to apply to subdivision of land for taking, not taking, but for acquiring roadway dedications as part of, and this is to be consistent with our comp plan. And an example would be if you had a 33-foot right-of-way in front of you, our standards would require it to maybe be 40 per our code. When they come through in the rezoning, they would just be required to come through and replat, do a one-lot plat in order for that dedication to be given over to the city so that we can move forward on some of our street projects. That's one of the rationale. The other one is it just clarifies ownership and clarifies the issue. This is pretty standard. I've called around other jurisdictions. Grand Forks does it. I believe Bismarck and Fargo do that as well. So I'm recommending a change that if you rezone a property that is unplatted, you're going to be required to plat that as part of the rezoning application. And I'd like to see if you're in favor of that. The only other question that I did not bring up as part of that is that in our subdivision regs, we exempt out parcels that are 40 acres or larger, as long as you are not creating a new road. And should this apply for properties that are even 40, let's say that are 80 acres and they want to rezone the property, they have no intentions at that time of subdividing. Should this still apply that we would require them to plat as part of that rezone? So those are my two questions for you today.
Inside, say something was 40 or to 80 acres or whatever, more than 40, and we know what the utilization would be at that time if they presented it.
Well, an example would be if they have ag property, as we are moving further to the west and doing some of these infills, and somebody has 60 acres and they want to rezone that ag to commercial. Example would be the projects we're talking here. This is 300 plus acres. They may have all ownership. They're planning on being the owner, developer, and the rest, and I want to clarify the issue that they should plat the property so that right-of-way dedication will be factored in, and we have a proper legal description as well. So that's the rationale behind that.
Sure.
Absolutely, it should be changed regardless of acreage.
Regardless of acreage? Okay. Yes. So that's the first item that I do have today. On the second page, then I would amend that. The specific language is on the upper paragraph, and it basically says any person or firm requesting a zoning classification or rezoning reclassification other than ag or agriculture zoning district must file and record an approved subdivision plat of the subject parcel with the Stark County Recorder's Office if all or a portion thereof has not been previously platted. Subdivision plat must have final approval prior to or concurrent with the final approval of the proposed zone change. All plats must be in conformance with Chapter 34 subdivision. This provision does not exempt out other required plats under, and that should be Chapter 34, not 40 on there. I will make a note that amend this, that this will be irrespective of size. So when this moves forward, if you recommend approval today when it goes to City Commission, that we will remove the size requirement under the current subdivision, which says anything below 40, and I'll just remove that with respect to rezonings. The second item that I have today is one that I'm going to hold off on a decision today, but I just want to bring to your attention. We've had, and I'm sure you've seen as developments occurred, especially in our apartments, where you have perpendicular garages. Our standard is if you have a drive aisle between parking spaces, and that would include garages, the minimum requirement is 24 feet. Well, 24 feet does not work. Even if you have a small car, it's extremely difficult with two structures as garages in order to make those turning movements to turn in. There are many apartment developments that, unfortunately, the garages that are counted as part of parking spaces are not used as parking because they can't be used. They have trucks, they have big cars, they can't make the turning movements, and what happens, you have a spillover onto the adjacent properties. Those garages end up becoming storage units and not the intent of the code. So I am proposing that we widen that width to 30 feet. This would also help out our fire departments as well. So that would be an additional 6 feet in order to ensure that we could have proper turning movements, and garages are used or have the ability to be used as garages for cars and not as storage units because it's impossible to make those turning movements. Fire department's concurrent with that along with engineering. This is an issue we've been struggling with for well over 2 years during our massive growth that we have in apartments. So that's the rationale for that. I have not spoken specifically to some of our apartment developers, so I am going to ask that get your input today. I'm going to send out an email to some of our larger developers and let them have the ability to comment on them. It's a courtesy, it's not a required, but I'll give them a courtesy to provide their input to you, and then you could ultimately make a decision at the next month's meeting, if that is your wish.
Ed?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to see, is 6 foot enough, or would you really like to see more, or is that adequate, do you think?
We feel that 6 foot is probably the bare minimum that would work. If you continually increase it with the cost of land, it's going to make it, you're going to start removing units because now they're going to have more and more exterior space that they're going to have to provide. So we're kind of cognizant, we're trying to balance that whole equation out. 30 feet is we feel that would be sufficient to be able to make these as usable garages, and I'll let Mr. Kubas talk about that.
We've just seen it anecdotally that 24 feet or 25 or 26, if you go into some of those prior R3 developments where they have those back-to-back garage units, they get dinged up. They get hit a lot by vehicles trying to get in there. And then, like Mr. Corton said, they end up not being used for garages. And then we have all of this on-street parking that wasn't the intent of the development. I think our developers are going to be in favor of this if they know about it ahead of time. That's why it's great to get into code, because as we see R3 plans come through City Hall, we make that comment back to them. Well, they've already have a layout, they've utilized their property, and now 6 feet can be the difference of a building working or not working. So it'd be great from our standpoint to get this in code so everyone knows up front as they're laying out their buildings and their garages that they need that 30-foot minimum. Anecdotally, we think it will work. We haven't ran it through an AutoCAD auto turn program yet. Sometimes it's hard to find that designed vehicle. Most people would run in an apartment unit. You'd run a passenger vehicle to see if it can make that turn, and it can in 24 feet. We don't see that as our standard apartment dwellers like it might be in other parts of the country. Our standard apartment dwellers have, half-ton, three-quarter-ton, 1-ton pickups, and they just don't fit in what we're trying to build here. So that's the reason for the code change. I think it'll help our staff out a lot when we get plans in for these R3 developments. If it just comes in, everyone knows up front that we want this 30-foot minimum setback.
Ed, is that going to count when you have open parking perpendicular to a garage?
We're leaving it as just perpendicular garages, and I'd actually like to put a structure in there. The reason for that, if you have open, then you have the ability for your bumper and the rest, if there's a vacant parking space, to kind of maneuver within that. I'm open to the idea. My personal preference would be applied across the board, but I want to take it a little step at a time just to make sure that we're not putting a development regulation that really adversely impacts our apartments that we need to have built as well. So if you want to ask me personally, am I in favor of just making that, if you have any perpendicular parking, it's 30 feet, that makes a lot of sense to me because everybody has big trucks around here. But I want to take it one step at a time and see how that comes to play with respect to apartments. But it makes sense to apply it across the board. So I'm looking at that when you have a physical structure that is in your way, you don't have that ability for your bumper or a portion of your car to go into an open space. Let's say if you had a curb there, you could go up to the curb, part of your hood and all that would be over that as long as there's not a tree or a shrub there and be able to maneuver. So you can get a couple more feet with respect to it. I would be fine if that's where if we want to take that additional step, but I'm vacillating on that particular issue. So I'm open to the idea if that's if we want to take that additional step.
Another issue I have is part of the problem is they don't build the garages deep enough to put a truck in. So
yeah,
30 feet doesn't make any difference if you only have a 20-foot deep garage. So
correct. Well, do we want to change the parking? Then
I mean that's the issue. That's why you're getting the trucks on the street. They don't fit in the garage. So I mean, you go over on Lincoln Street where Han built that townhouse project. I mean, that's all it is work trucks. There's not even anything parked inside there at all, anywhere, other than a car here or there. I mean, I drive by Lincoln every day because we're building some stuff over there. But I mean, if you look at the garages on those units, those are probably 20 feet deep. I mean, you can, yeah, a compact car or something will fit in there, but that's about it. So
correct. That's something that we're going to bring back. You know, at a later date, unless we want to take on that item right away, is the issue of should we increase parking stalls? You know, due to we have a unique environment here. I mean, 9 by 18 is a standard one that you apply across the nation. That doesn't work here in North Dakota. You can go to most of our developments and see, even if a truck fit, they normally have wider mirrors that come off and go into the next one. Should we increase that? And we've talked about, should we go to 10 or 11 and make it 22 as a parking space? But when you start to do that, you start to increase the amount of land. And, you know, as a developer, that's a significant increase for impervious surface and the rest. So I want to be cognizant. I want to react to what we have out there, but I don't want to put something that further complicates the development. So I go back and forth on that particular issue.
I mean, I don't see open parking as being a huge issue. It's like when you have garages back to back and then they're only 20 feet deep and you only got 24 feet to turn around. I mean, you're just not going to get a truck in there. It's nearly impossible. So
correct.
And if you go look at the Han Group stuff, some of their driveways are only, that go into those garages from the road are, what, 12 feet deep maybe? I mean, you couldn't even park in the driveway. I mean, it's not really a driveway. You know, it's interior. So,
right.
I mean, it's just some of the design doesn't make sense.
How did that ever come about?
I don't know. It's minimum standards. They meet minimum standards, and
yeah.
You know, I agree with you. I'm torn about stuff like that too. But we have to err on the side of what our city's going to look like in the next 100 years.
That's right.
And I don't think we should wait on these things. I'm not saying we should approve everything we talk about, but we should consider it and move it along as fast as you guys can put things together. I don't think we should wait.
So you have a consensus here that you should move along on those,
well,
the third item plus additional more.
Should we just make it as a standard if you have perpendicular parking, irrespective of if it's a structure or not, to make it as a 30-foot wide drive aisle? Is that what you're talking about, Commissioner Jackson?
No, I'm not talking. I'm more thinking about the point that Jason's bringing up about garages.
Yes.
You know, as a builder, is that reasonable to you to make that a bigger?
I mean, I know why they do it. It's land cost and
I understand.
expense. I mean, around here, I mean, we don't do anything less than 24 feet deep. I mean, and that's like the bare minimum.
You're saying you as a builder don't do, yeah. Well,
I mean, 24 feet deep is like, that'll get a pickup in there, but I mean, you won't be able to walk.
That statement alone makes me think that maybe we're missing the boat, that maybe we should have a 24-foot requirement.
Go from 18 to 24 and increase the width to 10, so 10 by 24 instead of 9 by 18.
But is that enclosed garage space, or are you talking open space?
Well, both. We could define the two. We could say specifically, if you're going to have a garage, you need to have a clearance, an open clearance of whatever the case may be. 11 by 24, or 12 by 24, in order for to make that work. I could easily put that in there and put that as a note that we're going to discuss that and let the development committee show up and either object and provide some rationale for that, and then use that as part of your basis for your decision. We could specifically just talk about garages and leave the existing garage parking stalls alone at this point, if you want to.
Some of these issues, I would hope that, I guess you guys, you and Steve, go to a home builders meeting. Throw it out there and let people chew on it. I know we have our public hearings here, but nobody ever shows up for the most part.
I mean, I don't think you'll find anybody local that'll disagree with 24 feet being a minimum.
See,
where you're going to run
that
into
tells
it,
me we should do it.
when you run into the situation is if you have a builder, let's say that's out of Las Vegas, where you don't have pickup trucks, and they probably do their garages 19 feet or 20 feet deep because all they have is, personal cars and stuff, That's a different situation. Some of the driveways you drive through, some of those subdivisions are only 16 feet long or something too. So, here, you need a 25-foot driveway and you need a 24-foot garage, I think, at the minimum. I mean, that's why you're getting so much on-street parking. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's really good food for thought for,
Okay.
I mean.
I will bring forth, in addition to the amendment to talking about perpendicular or between structures, and it could be the building itself, 24 feet, and in a garage, still the same applies. You don't have that ability to go into the building to be able to make the maneuver. I will amend it to say structure in garages, or just structure, and that will apply to garages, and then also state that the garages should be a minimum width of, a length of 24 feet, and probably, a vertical clearance of those 10, 12. What would you recommend as a developer, Jason? The actual vertical width that you have, not the lengthwise, to make them more usable, in your opinion.
I mean, I always go by the rule of 12 by 24 for a garage.
Yeah.
Minimum single, 24 by 24 for a minimum double, and I don't know, 30 to 32 wide for a minimum triple, by 24.
I would agree. So 12 by 24, and we'll put that out there and hear from the development committee.
Yeah, I mean, that's just my thoughts. And then, sure. I think another thing we have to look at, which is so antiquated in our code, is the curb cut width. I know we're trying to reserve off-street parking, but when you're building 32 and you're letting people build 1,200 square foot garages, you can't restrict a 36-foot wide garage to a 24-foot curb cut. I mean, it needs to be looked at. I mean, that was put in there back in the day when there were single and double garages only getting built around here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that you should be able to go the whole width of your garage, but 24 feet is way too narrow. I mean, and that pretty soon you got people parking like this. I mean, trying to drive into their garage. I mean, I understand where the code is, but I think it's antiquated. We need to look at widening it maybe to 30 feet or something, but 24 is way too narrow.
That's an issue we struggle with, and we go back and forth, and then people hear it, and then all of a sudden over the weekend it gets put in, and then it's, then you deal with the enforcement, and I agree. That's an issue that we've looked at. Maybe that would be a good item for the next one, that we'll have a work session, and I could have Leonard to attend this one as well, and since we'll hopefully have some of the development community here to comment, so they can comment on that as well, and see where you want to go with respect to that. So.
To me, the big message, Ed, to you and Steve, should be that these things you guys are seeing, most of us don't see these things day to day. You guys do. Let's fix them. Let's get them done.
It's a matter of time, Mr. Jackson, as you know.
Understand.
I mean, I have my book just written up with changes one way or the other, and I'm just trying to get some time, so I'm chomping at it as best I can.
So what are we supposed to be approving today?
Today, you want the two changes.
Today would be the amendment to the subdivision regulations as proposed. The increase of the setback distance for garages, I'd ask that would be delayed until next month, and I'll contact the developers. But the new provision in Chapter 39, Actually, I think I already have it in the motions that we already have here. 34 and 39, that would only specifically apply to what we're talking about, the replatting. So the motion that we do have would incorporate just if you rezone the property, you're required to have the plat, and then I will amend that to not exempt out parcels that are greater than 40 feet prior to city commission. So if you want to make a motion on that today, the motion that I do have would be sufficient for that.
Okay, and then we've closed discussion on that, and I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this amendment, proposed amendment change, please feel free to come forward.
Brandy, would you like to come forward and make a comment?
Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? We'll close public portion of this hearing at this time and ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the amendments to Chapter 34 subdivision of land and Chapter 39.
That is correct. 39 is the zoning
As
regs.
proposed by city staff, meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kovash. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
You know, I have a meeting at 10, and
Okay.
expect everybody else is ready to go too. But, you know, once again, we're being asked to consider a really significant policy thing with the street width and density, lot density question. And I've always felt so strongly that we shouldn't be deciding those things when we've got a developer sitting at the podium asking for that change. We should be doing it as a more general question and something that we may or may not think is right for our city across the board, because it will happen to us across the board if we approve this. So with that in mind, you know, maybe at our next meeting, I can't imagine we're going to see this Barron's thing at the next meeting, but you know, at our next meeting, can you guys maybe bring us pros and cons that we should be considering with that topic? Perhaps we could even get our consultant that's doing the sub-area plan just to get another school of thought, Qualmbeck or whoever, one of them, to join that conversation, so that, you know, I can think of pros and cons, but you guys probably can think of more than I do.
I think that'd be great. We could talk about curb cuts and we could talk about the density issue. And that's what I wanted to talk, you know, stimulate the conversation and say, they're proposing something significantly different. That's fine. It's going to have to be unique, but I'm going to be called on the carpet and say, you allowed them to have it, why can't I? And I want to make sure that if I allow it for this, that it's apples and oranges, and I'm in favor of increasing our density in our R1 based upon some additional standards that we may apply. And we briefly talked about it, and you said that you're kind of open, and it'd be sites and it'd be specific projects. But I think it'd be great, and maybe we come through and amend the code specifically so developers have that ability in order to do that instead of having to come in with a specific project. So
that'd be good. They can read the guidelines that here is acceptable in this case, and it's in code.
But here we are today,
Yeah.
making things bigger, and now we're talking about making them smaller, you know?
Yeah.
That's just, as a developer, everybody, more density is obviously, because you're going to get more out of your land.
I understand.
As a builder and a homeowner, I don't like it. So,
See, and I think...
you know what I'm saying? I mean, I wouldn't want to be living on a 40-foot lot or 45-foot lot and having my neighbor 4 feet from me, or 8 feet from me.
The next time you're in Fargo, go to South Fargo, and you'll see some much higher densities than we have, and narrower street widths. I don't believe that Bismarck is doing that. I think they're staying with the traditional density and...
And then you have the case where it's in a PUD, so you can say no off-street, no on-street parking, and, you know, you can
There again.
regulate that density.
There again, who enforces it though? I mean, if somebody's parking on the street, who's going to enforce it in that POD? We're going to send the PD around all the time to write parking tickets?
If you're not going to have parking, if you're not going to have parking in the streets, then by God, you better have bigger driveways and bigger lots.
Yep. There, that's it.
So,
yep, it's all good.
I move we adjourn.
Work in Fargo? I mean, do they have any issues?
I think
I-
Fargo, I mean, they've got so many apartments, it's just like it's apartment city.
But this is R1 stuff, and if you get to Fargo, you should drive south on 45th down there and.
I think the biggest issue that I've dealt with, for those to work where you change your normal standards and you shrink things down, which makes a lot of sense, economic sense for the city, everybody, you've got to have strong homeowners associations, active and strong ones, where you have people that are committed to that and enforcing that. If you don't have that, then it falls on a jurisdiction. Then it falls on a jurisdiction, then you have to have employees and time in order to do that. So that's the balancing act here. And right now, our HOAs are non-existent.
The streets I'm talking about in Fargo don't prohibit on-street parking. And there's very little on-street parking there, which I don't quite understand. It seems a bit like we have it so much in Dickinson.
They do have in Fargo, though, they do enforce the odd day, even day, whatever snow things and all that.
Yeah.
Pretty good, where if you're parked on a snow day in the wrong place, they'll come and take you away.
I think part of the answer to your question there, Gene, is there's a family of 2 people living there. Not 4 oil field guys that
I
each
think
have
that
their own
is-
pickup.
That is
You know,
part of the answer,
It's
yeah.
so unique, right?
But I tell you, if you go less than 40-foot street width and you park on both sides, it starts getting really tight.
And Gene's perfectly right about, we have a unique situation, but we don't want to do a quick fix that we're going to be living with forever.
Well,
I just came down the
It's just-
street yesterday over by the college, you know, there's both sides parking, those are narrow there. I mean, and I met a Suburban coming on with me in my Suburban, and I mean, you can barely get by each other with 2 cars on each side of you. I don't know what the street width is there, but.
Throw a truck in there yet because you're in adjacent commercial and he makes the wrong turn and doesn't know where he's going.
You know, I'm open to maybe a smaller lot size, but I don't know about 4,500 square feet.
There's ways of working with that, and we could talk about the pros and cons with respect to things, because you have to, in any kind of change, you always need to consider what the existing developments are, and as Jason has already mentioned, I don't want to live next to a development where they abut against me and now they have reduced areas or their houses are closer than the rest. Well, what you do on that, you would say that the first block needs to be consistent with the existing zoning district, the standards, and then from there you merge in and you do it interior, and everyone that buys into that development is aware that those middle lots or the middle of the development is going to be this size.
You know, as we talk about this, I'd like to see a sketch of a 1,200 square foot home with a double garage on a 7,000 foot lot and a 4,500. I'd like to see what that looks like on paper.
It looks a lot smaller.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
There's motion, there's a second? All in favor? Meeting adjourned.